Hi guys, Hengist here from House of Hengist Comics, and a big welcome back to the channel. Today we're in the Netherlands. It's Blitzkrieg episode 17, De Klenke. First, the news. We've got a couple of pictures here from the locals. Here is the Daily Star, and they're talking about strong anti-aircraft resistance. This is rather critical. The Germans have broken through. They're out of the Ardennes and are fanning out. There is general terror basically in Holland. They know they're coming. And what we've got is fifth columnists, which are suddenly manifesting as the invasion starts. We've also got a lot of pro-German Nazi sympathisers, but the Germans are really prepared for Holland. Far more prepared than the Dutch believed. And it's a huge airborne carpet that's going to be falling. A massive operation, which basically includes really the largest scale parachute drop so far. We've seen it in basically Norway. This time they're using gummiputschen, which is dummy parachutes. And it's all about the bridges, gentlemen. Thunderclap surprise, take the bridges so that the forces that are penetrating the border can effectively link up and relieve them. So it's a sort of seize and hold operation on a massive, massive scale. Key, again, infantry, more infantry. And these are going to be there to try and take these bridges, including SS elements. But today we're also going to be looking at the cavalry and their first operations as they penetrate Holland, causing massive confusion as the frontier is hit. Here we can see the frontier guards. They're expecting the Germans. And of course, unfortunately, poor Queen Wilhelmina has got to make some really tough decisions. A lot of civilians are going to be affected by what goes on. And the Dutch are a very strong and proud and traditional people. A great video on this, and I really recommend it, so freeze this and go to the YouTube and watch it, is the Battle of the Netherlands. But let's look at the maps, and here are the dates. We've got Dordrecht, Moerdijk, we've got The Hague and Utrecht, key aspects, and in the Leeuwarden operations we've also got that up on the 11th of May as well. Key to this is the 17th century Dutch policy of providing what they called the Dutch waterline, a defensive barrier to their main cities. And this was basically reinforced in the 1940s, but the machine gun positions and emplacements weren't that strong. They did rely on concrete, yes, and these were very well supported but at these strong points. But the flooding, that's the major barrier. That's what they're hoping to stop any invader with, to buy time, so to speak. But this is also going to affect the civilians as well and cause chaos themselves. But as you look at that flooding, you get an idea of its damage and its effects. And here we can see the waterways, note Maastricht, Genappe, and obviously Moerdijk again. And here we can see the grey areas as the Germans penetrate. So we'll be following that route. But key to this at Fortress Holland are to basically, and what the Germans are going to do is land behind, secure the bridges, and then punch through down these roads basically and basically link up. This is a massively risky operation and you can see it will be about the bridges, but if these bridges are blown or if there are problems, and the Dutch will be doing this, it's going to cause delays and that could lead to some real damage. So great history coming up, guys. Let's look at the Dutch forces today as well. They are predominantly an infantry-based arm. They've got this greeny blue uniform, which I really quite like and I think makes great painting. We've also got a huge number of, as we said, rifle-based infantry, but they've also got bicycle troops. Again, we've talked about the importance in the lowlands of bicycles. They've got these machine guns. They've got mortars, which are a little limited, but also anti-tank guns, the Bull anti-tank guns. One other factor which they have is quite a lot of artillery. Much is French and Czech, which they've purchased. But the critical aspect, which has a knock-on effect in the war, is the anti-aircraft. And they are really effective in this, shooting down a huge amount of the German transports. I think over 70% were used in this airlift operation, and they suffered huge casualties, which was to have a knock-on effect. They may also have cavalry and some armoured cars. They've got very few of these, but they've got a good gun. It will be probably deck driven. We'll have to wait and see for that. But they are green, so they are reluctant until proven otherwise. And they will be in a good defensive position. The Germans, well, the German forces as usual, but again, confident, trained. These are cavalry, and we wanted to focus on the cavalry as they penetrate that border and basically show really their mobility and their important role as well. Often overlooked, often ignored. They have a huge role to play. They can also shoot on the move. They don't get the benefit of sabre. They're not really cavalry but mounted infantry, and really effectively have the same benefits as the regular Wehrmacht infantry. Again, speed, mobility, and also some firepower with their horse-drawn artillery, which have the benefit of effectively stopping and fire as all horse artillery do. Let's get into the research now and the set. And here is De Klenke, typically Dutch. I like the Dutch gable system and their houses, they're wonderful. But the cover here, which Campaign Sounds produced, suggests a very open, effective battlescape. But we've got a lot of cover around De Klenke as well, and I think that will be critical to the Dutch system. Also, as you can see, although the lowlands are flat, there's a lot of these irrigation ditches, and we've had a look at this, and these were used extensively, as you can see from this photograph, by both infantry forces, and are going to give bulletproof cover. So we had to build this into the game. Here's a picture of the moat that I had to knock up real quick. Okay, let's look at that in context now. And here we can see the moated building. We've also got the windmill here, which is the start point for the Germans. They'll be behind that irrigation canal. They'll be heading towards De Klenke basically to take that position. It's a primary position, and the bridge. There's a lot of flooding in the area, which is bogging checks for infantry and vehicles. We've also got the canal itself, which is a barrier, so they've got to get across that bridge. And we can see here from the Dutch entry and exit point, this is where their reserves may be coming, all deck driven. We've got the cottages, a lot of cover around this area as well, and they'll be using that. The brewery, well, that's a motivation test for the lads if they go in that. And of course we've also got a general view here which shows the open terrain. Critical, obviously, are these irrigation ditches, which is, as I've said, if they're in them, they're in a defensive position. The canal and its bridge, notice the speed hump, that's limited with tonnage. And we've also got the prime objective, as I said, De Klenke one here, with the civilians evacuating as we start, and the bakery as objective 2. So in synopsis, the mission and its objectives, as we look at the map again, and you can see De Klenke and the bakery are the objectives. It's 12 turns. We're using again Achtung Panzer. We'll use our battle decks as well. So let's get into the action now. It's a beautiful warm morning here in Holland, and what we've got at De Klenke is a 45 position with a rifle MG platoon dug in there. We've got a rifle platoon which has been deployed here at the bakery. We've also got a rifle platoon at the front and a rifle MG supporting it. It's a tiered defence, interlocked, with 5 platoons basically. They've got no artillery. They've got to support one another. It's got to be mutually supporting or they'll be weak. And this was a really good defence position by the Dutch. They deployed really well. As we see the Germans erupt from the tree line. Their bicycle troops are in the lower right hand corner. Their cavalry starts moving ahead, as you can see here, supported by mortars. And on the other flank we have the other platoon, as you can see here, moving up. We've also got the ambulance and the cook moving in support. These give certain bonuses and benefits. We've also got the horse artillery, which will be following up the infantry, and they are making a determined attack. As we can see, the mortars, by the numbers, putting smoke down in front of the bridge, which hasn't been defended, and that was deliberate to allow this killing space. And what we can see is the bicycle troops moving forwards, basically up towards the canal to make a second entry point. The Germans cross that one bridge. That's all they've got. They've had to use the smoke, and they use it really effectively, and that was the correct way to really to move forward. And their horse artillery unlimber and prepared to bombard. What we now see basically are the Dutch, who have just to sit and wait, and many of their platoons go on overwatch during these German initial moves. At the brewery, all is quiet, or so it appears. Outrageous product placement. What we've now can see here is basically the rest of the Dutch towards the bakery, also dug in and gone to ground with local knowledge as well. The Germans move up. Their tripoded MGs basically set up and begin opening fire, giving cover to the cavalry as it pushes over the bridge with the ambulance. We've also got a disaster on our hands at this canal. At the second point, the bicycle troops try and get across as artillery ranges in on that rifle platoon, the advanced rifle platoon. And we've also got the cavalry dismount and prepare to assault. Just as they do, overwatch is called. and they open fire, and it was one of the best overwatches we've seen. It kills basically 8 men, and it pins the platoon, which was then unable to basically recover it, and it had to stop and couldn't assault that turn. As cavalry arrive now with their pennant fluttering, that orange colour in the air, and we can see more casualties from the bicycle platoon as they roll a series of 1s and 2s, and they've lost about 50% of their platoon just trying to get to the other side of the bank. But smoke is down. The infantry are now rallied and they're ready to go as the Dutch cavalry dismount and enter the brewery, only to take a drink, become pinned and can't move. And we've got the ambulance moving forward into this firestorm. More dead again at the canal. It's a disaster for the bicycle troops, but they're going to go in on this assault with the infantry against the rifle platoon. An assault they do. They're unsupported on the left flank, but the cavalry are supported, and a first melee really takes place, and it's a pretty brutal one. Unfortunately, the Germans lose a few casualties, but the Dutch take more losses, but they don't break and they fall back. Although suppressed, they are to recover that suppression real quick. The German cavalry now move up to exploit. This is what they're hoping for, as we can see dead Dutchmen here who basically fought gallantly in that rifle platoon. What we've also now got is basically the cavalry coming up and taking that position and dismounting out of the brewery. They're going to hold off the bicycle troops. We also get the arrival of German SDK-13 armoured cars, and the Germans desperately needed this. If you look at the map, the blue represents the defensive positions and the black are the arrows of the German progression. The Germans are now going to press in a pincer and try and take that brewery position and move up on the bakery. They prepare to launch an assault. They use their artillery as civilians are as civilians who evacuate it. We now get mortar fire coming down as this is going on to pin, then pin down and hopefully suppress, but they fail to suppress as the bicycle troops, what's left of them, about 16 men, also join the cavalry in this assault against the rifle MG platoon, which is the second tier of defence. One of the most brutal assaults that I remember. It goes on for about 6 turns. There are casualties all over the place, medics working overtime. It's dramatic stuff with 1ICs engaging one another. It's at point blank, pistols, sabres, rifle butts. It's taking place, and ultimately the Germans basically gain a sort of Pyrrhic victory because the bicycle troops are wiped out by a single man team, a natural born killer. He does a lot of damage, and so do the Dutch. The cavalry could have broken through, but they've only got effectively 6 horsemen left. The rifle platoon that had been broken have rallied and moved back, hopefully to join a second tier, and this picture shows the sort of damage and them moving out. The cavalry now try and head forward. They're going to use the armoured cars and try, but ambush, bang! Heavy machine guns open fire and 12 men go down. A disaster. That platoon then breaks as the armoured cars practically overrun the other rifle MG platoon, but they can't exploit, and they aren't broken either. It's looking bad for the Germans. They just can't get through. It's turn 10 and they're way off the mark really in terms of getting to the objective. And the German 1IC decides that the only thing they can do is lay cover in smoke and pull back and hold that bridgehead until reserves arrive. And that was the correct tactical thing to do in this situation. Their ambulance has been incredible today, but really the rest of their luck hasn't been so good. They fall back in good order. It's a disaster down at the canal with bicycles sunk to the bottom of it now, and lots of corpses unfortunately floating in that canal. What we can see here though is that the Dutch have basically held the bakery. It's a Dutch victory, guys. 25 victory points. Well, what can we say in postscript other than this was a fantastic game, very well played by the Dutch, who deserve full credit for their performance and excellent deployment. They retreat in good order and can hold their heads high. The Germans, I think, were very unlucky. It didn't quite pan out. A disaster at the canal as they tried to swim it, and why you need engineers. We've got Holland, perhaps not quite the picnic that it looks like. Queen Wilhelmina has got to make some tough choices. The fate of a nation is in her hands. And a lot of these battles in Holland are going to be about bridges, and we've got a massive Fallschirmjäger airdrop to do and a series of actions, and we've got loads more coming up from Holland. So never forget their sacrifice, stay tuned, Stay lucky, and best wishes. Over and out from me.